That's a good look. We running? Okay, good to go. All right, so I'm not gonna lie. I've been procrastinating. Today's been a weird day, but I've been thinking about game creation options. Now, I don't think that all of the ones that I'm looking to do are necessarily quite worked out yet. So, yeah, notice I cleaned this up. This shab. It's a huge mess before I got back to fixing it up. All right, so I'm still working on the audio games for podcasting, but I'm also sort of sidetracking a little. It's one of those things that happens when one of the things I was thinking of for storylines for some of my podcast choose your own adventure style stuff, that was re-exploring some of the stuff I had been working on before. So once upon a time, back when I was doing YouTube videos that were choose your own adventure stuff that I was scripting out and using annotations, I had built a master list, which I think at this point is long lost. I had made a master list of some of the ideas, and some of them were, there was a steampunk themed horror superhero, which honestly, now that I think about it, like that was an idea I had back when I was living on Beacon Street in Manchester. That was 5 or 6 years ago, minimum. And the idea I had for that one was based off of the idea that you start with a character in sort of a steampunky Victorian era who's put into a asylum for what would have been very inappropriate behavior then, but nobody would blink at now. And you start with the character being in that situation and uncovering a conspiracy to weaponize people with unusual, not really abilities, but with mindsets that make them open to accessing the Akashic records and things like that. So I was playing with that idea as a choose your own adventure story. And as I was building that story out, I wanted to, as I was going to do it as a video, choose your own adventure video, I wanted to do it with the old style, I guess you'd call them shadow puppets. They're sort of like the paper cutouts, decorative paper cutouts with hinged joints on sticks, and you put them on the other side of a sort of a sheet of paper that you shine a light against the back of it, and the shadow cast by the puppet onto the paper performs the actions that you display. I thought it'd be kind of fun to do a video with that format. So that was one of the ideas. That was just one of, I think I had 6 or 7 ideas that I was working on. One of them was The one that reemerged in my head was called Signal to Noise. And it was meant to be sort of like you play in an environment with headphones on for the ambient sound, but you could also just play it completely silently because the main character requires headphones to survive, which is a weird thing. So you sort of remove the sound element from the play, other than maybe making an ambient or soundtrack based feature. So you can play it completely deaf, and the character is interacting from an environment of sort of like there's a villainous character who's out to destroy people. And yeah, I was thinking about that game, and I really like that one. Has a very distinctive art style in my head, and the gameplay maybe could be done as a choose your own adventure. Weirdly, as a game that can be played completely silent, the option of having ambient sounds and sort of like a looping, like that video game soundtrack. It's not a song because it's an infinitely running theme, like Legend of Zelda had that music that played over and over again. That sort of ability to play music, I kind of want to have a very specific sound style that I wanted to do for it. And so building and constructing that sound style might be a bit of a hurdle, as well as the animation style that I want to go for. So it may take a little work to get that figured out. But as I was thinking about it, I was exploring the opportunity to there was another game that I was thinking of doing at one point that was sort of cyberpunk, that I wanted to use video game characters to animate. So I would build my sprites, and I would make it, like the old, like the Pokemon games. The characters in the Pokemon games are a series of sprites that when you push the controller one way or the other, moves them across the board. Up, down, left, right, jump, climb. All those features are animations that are done with a very simple set of limited animations. So if I could build a set of those, and then there's a part of me that feels like I could make a video game that animates images. It's basically a puppetry video game, a marionette video game. So you'd have a character be able to move across the screen, interact with their environment, jump, hop, climb, swing, all those features that video games give a character the ability to do. You'd have them in an image that you can then use for narration purposes. And theoretically, as I'm thinking about it right now, there may even be a way to expand those capabilities a little bit further, in the sense that it's not a traditional game, but you could take a game design software setup and make the facial features and maybe even the body of the character on screen controllable. So misusing the software used to make most video games in order to make a digital puppet. It's a possibility. It's just something to think about. But thinking about that brought to mind some of the other games that we worked on. Cuddle Pop, Liquid Metal Rage, and some of those types of things. And I know I canceled the build box option because it had enough limitations on it, on what it could do, and the cost was prohibitive. But I had been considering playing around with RPG Maker, and lordy loo, did I find some interesting things there. So it looks like I've seen a few examples of people using RPG Maker to make essentially what's a platformer game, a Mega Man or a Super Mario style game. It's not meant to do that, but you can. A few people have. It's a little quirky, so you might have to do a little tweaking. But the thing about RPG Maker MV in particular is there have been people who build plugins that enable you to do other things. And I found a couple beauties. So I was looking up some things about it today, and I encountered there is a program for, I think it's MV. It might be one of the other ones. Let's just do a search to make sure. There's RPG Maker Paper. Came out a few years ago. Let's see what that looks like. So make 3D games is, well, the first thing I found was, I'll cover that first, because I found Paper later. There's MV 3D plugin for RPG Maker MV. So now you can make 3D games in RPG Maker MV powered by Babylon JS, whatever that is. With little setup, wall tiles will automatically be interpreted as 3D. So I found this thing and I was blown away by it was somebody did a YouTube video where they demoed what this can do. Oh my god. Oh my god. This is a dream project. This is amazing. I'm pretty enthusiastic about it. So I'm interested in exploring that. But they also mentioned Smile Game Maker, I think it was, or Smile Game Builder, which is a fully 3D thing. The trick is the MV3D takes the standard Legend of Zelda format. You build the same kind of things as you would in a standard Legend of Zelda or Dragon Warrior game, or the original Final Fantasy games. You take those very simple standards and you can build them the same way you would build any of those games. And it uses the sprites. This is what I thought was interesting. It uses the character sprites face on and side views, but it props them up in a 3D environment, and the environmental tiles are similarly kind of, they're given edges if they're laying flat, and they're propped up if they're walls. And so it really just bends it. Like the environment I saw that they used or made looked so much like a better version of Minecraft almost. Like like the images of objects, like a signpost. They look like you could use them to cut out paper versions of them, and there are a couple different ways it can follow it. Sometimes as you move, they'll rotate to track you, but sometimes they'll use what's an X form, which is basically like taking the image and cutting it out, and then cutting a slit up halfway, and then cutting a duplicate, cutting a slit halfway down, and forming an X out of them so they're freestanding papercraft models. You could totally do that. And that's one of the formats they did for that. And characters, if you come at them from the side, they'll use the side view. But if you move around to the front, that diagonal angle you pass through, it'll pick either side or front. So you're using the sprites that are built to be interacted with from side or front, but they're being done in such a way that they look like they're three-dimensional figures. It's just like, oh, I was so impressed by it. If you can find some images, you should totally check it out. But I was like blown away. But in that video, they also mentioned RPG Paper Maker. So making 3D games is too complex. RPG Paper Maker will simplify your work. RPG Maker is Paper Maker is a game making engine free for non-commercial use, allowing you to create 3D universe with many 2D sprites and even 3D objects using a simple interface. Is this an addition to? Okay, so RPG Paper Maker is a free. Is it free to use? Okay, so as long as you don't have any profit with your game, you can use RPG Maker, Paper Maker freely. Okay, so that it's free to use, but it's also you can't make anything to sell with it. Any commercial game made with RPG Paper Maker will require a license to be sold for one person in a team with unlimited games. The actual price is $70. All right, so that's less exciting. Now, in order to use for frickin' sake, I wish he'd wash his garbage so that we wouldn't have these frickin' fruit flies. This is great. I'm gonna have this all over the house now. Okay, RPG Game Maker MV 3D does have a free mode, I believe. A demo mode, I think is what they call it. But they also have a purchase price. Now their purchase price is $20 in addition to having to have RPG Maker, which I believe. Oh, for God. Everybody's picking a fight with me tonight. I'm just about ready to hang up the freaking mic. RPG Maker MV3D has a cost of $20 on top of the $80 for MV, which I believe is the standard. The MV is the previous iteration. They just came out with a new iteration, I think MZ. MZ does not currently have any plugins that I'm aware of. So I may hold off on that for a bit, but and if I got MZ on top of MV, and MV RPG Maker appears to have some upgrades, but minor upgrades in comparison to MV. But they're both the same price. If at some point I wanted to upgrade, it's going to be another $80, and I'm not super keen about that. But it looks like all of the extensions that you can get that turn MV into a 3D gamer, and I think there was a game recently that came out from a developer who made an MV platformer game. And that one, I think he said he was actually looking to see if he could offer the extension that allowed that to be used that way. And so I'm kind of curious about the possibility of being able to use RPG Maker to make platformers, 3D games, and standard RPG games, possibly using them to do animations. So I do think the extent to which I could do more with RPG Maker seems like a good replacement for the other ones. That is contingent on I want to kill these little things. These little frickin' fruit flies that are all over the place now. Because this doofus didn't wash his garbage and just left it sit in a bucket. Alright, anyway. I'm getting crabby. So it has some definite potential for being able to create things with it. And the cover price for the potential, what I was looking at was if I did something like Cuddle Pop, which was something I could potentially do with BuildBox, but it was pushing the edge of what BuildBox could do. And BuildBox was going to cost me $200 to $300 if I remember correctly, and only limit me to a certain number of levels. No, one level, 5 scenes, I think. I just that's not enough to make a full game. The next level up was way more expensive, and I'm not interested in that. That sort of option does not appeal to me. So having the RPG Maker and bending it to do, in many cases, more than BuildBox can, because basically in an RPG style game like RPG Maker has, you have a character that's in the center of the screen, and you can move them left, right, up, down, diagonals, and you just move them across the map. They can hit certain areas that mark an event that causes an event to happen. You can go to areas and enter them, and the screen fades and opens up in another map that you can walk across. And so they have those features. They also have combat modes, one of which is like a large-scale illustrative character design that you can have in turn-based combat. And I think that would be great for cutscenes. And so looking at those opportunities, I think I could do something like Cuddle Pop, where what I do would be essentially set the map so that there are edges and make a channel up the middle that you have to travel up. And as you're traveling, have hazards come out that you're confronted by, and then do any cutscenes as a sort of a large-scale character combat mode. And I don't know how much I can get away with doing that, but I think I could probably pull that off. And it's just about the same amount of bending the game engine as I would have to do with BuildBox. But for $80, I have unlimited ability to build whatever I want. Sounds like a better deal to me. And here's the thing. I could also do a Liquid Metal Rage. Liquid Metal Rage, if I remember correctly, was the one we were doing where you essentially have these complex labyrinths that move at a certain rate, and you're trying to move your blob of mercury through that maze. And sometimes you're committed to a choice that you've made that kills you. So you have to go back and try to get through and work your way through that. So that one, I think it's entirely possible that I could build labyrinths for this Liquid Metal and change up a little bit of the game design so that it has more tricks to gameplay. And I remember a puzzle game we were playing at before that too. I have to go back and watch the videos from last year and try to remember, because I know it's something BuildBox couldn't do, but I almost guarantee you I could do it with RPG Maker. Because you can set floor puzzles and move object kind of puzzles in RPG Maker. And so if you just do that, I think it has a lot of potential. And I could potentially use it for virtual puppetry. And I could make a platformer game out of it. And here's where it comes into some interesting opportunities here. There was a game that I wanted to do with anything that would let me do it, that I was hitting hard limits for what I could achieve using BuildBox. It's more of a side-scroller themed platformer kind of game. But I think I could build it with RPG Maker. And because they're not limiting me to a number of worlds or scenes that I can make, I don't have to scrimp and tweak and play with and build pieces of it that I can then later rip apart and try to assemble into a greater whole with a purchase of BuildBox. And BuildBox purchase price is, I think it was, they say it's per month, but you have to pay it by the year. So like it's a year purchase, and a year purchase for $300 for the minimum. Or I think $300 was the one where I could maybe have enough world builds, but barely. And if I really wanted to have cutscenes like I would like, I'd have to do them as separate worlds. And that adds more worlds. So basically what you'd want is the unlimited version, which I think was like $800 to $900 or something. For $80, I can get an RPG Maker. And for another $20, I can get this 3D feature. And maybe another $20 if the guy's doing the platformer as an extension. So $120. $120. Way better deal. And it's not a subscription. It's not an annual thing that I have to do. It's a one-time purchase as far as I've been able to see. So RPG Maker is, let's see, buy it in, yep. Choose a region, yep. So it's $79. Simple enough for a child, powerful enough for a developer. RPG Maker was born, yep. 4 years have passed since the release of the previous RPG Maker, VX Ace. Landscape of gaming, especially for RPGs, has changed greatly. So did the latest installment, RPG Maker MV, allows the dream. So yeah. And here's the other thing. Like, a lot of what people do with RPG Maker, they use basically stock pieces. But I've watched a few examples of how people have just essentially, what they've essentially done is they've built their own supplies with GIMP and MS Paint, because it's pixel art. You're using sprites in most cases. So they just build pixel art. And you use GIMP to remove the background, and you're good to go. So I could literally make the art for the monsters or whatever you're fighting or whatever, your characters, the tiles that you use for the backgrounds, all of that I can build my own. So it doesn't have to look the same. I could use Mortal Kombat style figures with a backdrop, with the land tiles set up a certain way that I make to suit my needs. And I'm like, that seems like it's probably ideal. The ability to customize this is really, really good. And the ability to expand its capabilities through extensions like that MV3D, I was looking at that, and one of the other things you can do with that, it tends to do it as you see the characters as 3D figures sort of moving through 3D terrain, which looks impressive as all get out. It's still pixel art, but it looks amazing. But they did a feature where they just did one little button change, and it's a first-person game. I went, oh my God, a first-person RPG. Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. And so I got pretty enthusiastic about that. And it reminded me of one of the games that I used to play when I was younger. It used to be the old Strategic Simulations Incorporated Dungeons and Dragons games, where you could play a sort of limited version of Dungeons and Dragons on your computer. I had the big 5-inch floppies. I think I had the 5-inch floppies at first. Yeah, I think I did. And then I had the smaller floppies with some of it at one point. And then they came on CD-ROM. And the cool thing about that design was the gameplay for that was you have these little pixel art figures that you customize by swapping pieces out. And honestly, I could make dozens of simple pixel art pictures that are way better than those ever were. And the interface for the game was, there were 3 types of movement. There was overland, so when you leave a city, you can go out across the terrain, and it's very similar to the overland travel in many of the RPG games that we have now, like Dragon Warrior and stuff. It was a little figure that just moves across a hex map or a graph paper almost. And so there's that. Then there was in-city, and then there was combat. I'll get to in-city in a second. In combat mode, they put, again, your little pixel art figure on a map of a location within a city or a dungeon or whatever. And there are other little monsters, and each person takes a turn moving their character. And then you get into combat and you attack, and then the next person moves and does their version of that. I think that's still my preferred mode of combat. I'm not big on the line of character on the left, line of characters on the right. This person steps forward, waves us something, and it does damage to this character over here. I'm not big on that crap. But if it's the only thing I can do, then it'll be the only thing I can do. I think there are a couple other ways to do it, though. But the in-city mode that was interesting for the D&D role-playing was you have a window at the bottom which has descriptions of things. You have, I think, some character data to the right side. Then you had a window on the left that was basically a still frame image of your view. And then you take a step and it zooms in on territories, or it moves left when you move left and it moves right. And so it's like, it's first person. It was a first person slideshow is what it was, but it still performed the function right. Now, if I were to get the chance to play those games again, what I'd love to see is them adapted to a more modern way where you could do that window of first person view with the data on the right hand side and any dialogue or whatever happening at the bottom. But you can do it not as a slideshow, but actual positionable first person view. And then you can move to overland travel, and then you can move to person combat. And I'm like, I would love to see a reboot, a restyling of those with better graphics and better capabilities, but still holding to that same pattern that they used in this Strategic Simulations Incorporated games. So I'm kind of curious about exploring that possibility. There was something else I was going to say. I do think that I would also like to see if I could do the platformers version similar to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or the X-Men version, because that was one of the things I was using for the foundation of the zombie game that I was building last year. The zombie game was not just a straight line across the screen, but being able to move up and down a little bit, like moving forward and back across the street. And I feel like I'm pretty sure I could do that. And it feels like there's so many options that I might be able to pull off. Especially with just between RPG Maker and the MV3D. If I can get them to work, I can invest in them. Those seem like really great opportunities. It's 38 minutes in. I might talk about this a little bit more. What's the next day? Tuesday. We'll see how it goes. I have been fairly enthusiastic about this tonight. I'm a little scatterbrained right now, but I will be back on Tuesday. So I want to thank you for watching this one. I'll catch you in the next one. And until then, take care and have a good night. And.